Saturday's Warrior.
Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. It is Holy War week, and joining us to preview the Holy War tonight, you can't do that on here, not allowed, is Trevor Riley, a.k.a. Hollywood from Tailgate Podcast, the College Huddle Utah show. Trevor, thanks for joining. I know it's really hard for you to come and show your face this time of year in public. No, I'm kidding. We're going to keep this one pretty civil tonight. And we also got Trevor's brother will be joining us at some point, who grew up a BYU, well, is a BYU fan, but they grew up in the same household, opposite sides of things. So kind of give us a little taste of the Holy War growing up. But man, we'll get into the X's and O's a little bit later. But how are you feeling this week? Because I had you on earlier in the season, and you at that point you were feeling a little bit iffy about the Holy War at that point in the season. How do you feel now?
Yeah, still a little iffy. I'm feeling probably a little more confident after last week. I was at the game against ASU. Utah looks really, really good. I think one of the things that we talked about, they had 280 something yards rushing, averaged as a unit 7 yards per carry. And I just think that offensive line has been able to do pretty much whatever they want as far as the run game. And it's been good to see a healthy Dampier kind of making moves and running the ball, but also being conscious of when he needs to go down, when he needs to go out of bounds. And so feeling really good about where the team sits going into the game on Saturday. But still, I think I'm just probably more of an unknown as far as what the BYU team is. I thought, they've looked really, really good all season. And then against Arizona, I thought it was great for them to come back and win the way that they did. But I didn't get to see much of that game. And so it's going to be interesting. I'm nervous with any time there's a rivalry game between BYU and Utah. I'm always nervous. But I think this is probably going to be as evenly matched as they've been going into a game in as many years as I can think of.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting one. We got Tyson here ready to join, so I'll bring him in. And hey, Tyson, thanks for
Hey, gentlemen, how are we doing?
Doing well. So this is Tyson.
This is my brother. He is that battle every time. So,
yeah, definitely between the two of you, I'd say the non-blonde wig is definitely a more solid look there. But so sweet. Well, hey Tyson, thanks for joining. Because now we have the Utes outnumbered. No, that's not really why we did this. I thought it'd be really cool to have both you guys on and get the perspective. So growing up, how did you guys end up being on different sides of this rivalry?
Yeah, so I kind of took the path of least resistance. My grandpa, he would take us to games. My mom and dad were BYU fans. My cousins were BYU fans, and so it was kind of just an easy fit. Trevor, I think, was more of a
sinner.
No, I think Trevor wanted to be different. He just wanted to separate himself from everybody else, and to his credit, that's what he's done most of his life. You can't find a Utah fan that's more dedicated than the time that he spends with basketball or with football. Look behind him. He's pretty dedicated to his team. So I am just glad that we're in a place now that we're at, because if we'd have had this podcast about 20 years ago, you'd need a referee. It was bad. It was really bad.
Not even 10 years, not even 20 years ago. I mean, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, because I'm a very competitive person. So I like there to be some struggle. So in our household, it was always BYU and 49ers. Steve Young went to San Francisco, so everybody loved the 49ers. And so as a kid, I wanted to be kind of the opposite. And Tyson and I are twin brothers. I don't know if we covered that, but so he liked the 49ers and he liked the Cougars. And so the opposite of that is the Dallas Cowboys and the University of Utah. And so I remember as kids, like we could not watch the game in the same room because, you know, when your team makes a good play and as fans, right, you get that, oh, let's go. But it wasn't just a let's go. It was turn and find your sibling and get in their face. And it just, we knew how to put the screws to each other, and it was not a.
It wasn't enough for your team to have a good play. It felt like when they had a good play, you were getting one over on your sibling, and so you constantly, like Trevor said, you put the screws in them, and you want to make sure that they know your team's doing better than theirs. There was was it the Johnny Harleen that we almost went fisticuffs. It was brutal because BYU was losing the whole game, and he was just happy as all get out. And then that final play, and I look back and I feel bad for the way I acted, but we had to be separated. It was that bad. Like Harleen caught that catch, and yeah, it felt good at the time, but yeah, there was some lasting scars from that one for sure.
Oh man, it's amazing that you guys have been able to overcome it. So I have a lot of family, extended family that are on either sides of the rivalry. My dad is a Ute, but he's been very supportive. I always say it's because he saved so much money by sending us to BYU instead of Utah, especially being out of state. It's ridiculous. So he'd always come to BYU games with us whenever they're on the East Coast, but he would wear his Utah hat. But he came to ECU this year. He even got a Utah or a BYU hat, and he wore it. And so he's just getting soft in his old age. But he's a lot nicer and more supportive than I am. I've just learned to hold my tongue and let that be enough. And I try to return the favor of the equal support. And I not quite there, but
you get there with time. I'll actually cheer for Utah if they're not playing BYU. Like I genuinely want them to do well. A good buddy of mine invited me to the game this last Saturday, and I would have gone, but we had some other family commitments. But yeah, 10 years ago, you couldn't catch me. If I would have been invited to a Utah game, I probably would have showed up in all blue and cheering against Utah and cheering for the team that they were playing. But yeah, it's a crazy journey to see the progression throughout our life and cheering for your team. But then also, I love my family. I genuinely have some really great friends in my life who love the U. And so the last thing I want to see is them to be, down or upset. It's occasionally nice when BYU plays them. Like I was at the game last year, and that was a fun walk out of that stadium. But yeah, it's tough because you see them go through those same feelings that for almost 10 years watching Utah just beat BYU over and over, and that 7-year, 8-year, whatever that streak was, that was painful. That was difficult to go through. And so now that we're not, it's not anything like it was when Utah was dominant, but it is nice to see Utah and BYU in the same conference again, to see BYU on a path where they're making progress. They're getting to a point where it looks like they're going to be able to sustain long-term success. So
our oldest kids were born in 2009 and 2010. And the longest running joke was until Gavin was probably 12. Because
Gavin's my oldest.
There were years where it was an off year and BYU didn't play Utah, but I think it ended up being like 12 years where they hadn't beat Utah. That was the ongoing joke, is your kids live in a world where BYU's never beat Utah. And my kids have lived in a world where they've never lost to BYU. And so that was probably me sticking the knife in a little bit throughout that time. But
I still got it if you want it back.
Again, hey, listen, as a kid, I had to go through the Lavelle Edward years where, I mean, it was not an easy time to pick going against BYU to become a Utah fan, because I got very rarely were those matchups my way as a kid. And it's turned the tide a little bit over the years, but it was not easy sledding as a kid watching those games.
I remember that was the one time. And again, I don't really know how I chose BYU because my dad's a Ute. My mom went to BYU, but she doesn't care. And my brother was all in on the Cougars, and so I think that's how I did it, just through him. I don't know why I chose. I liked blue, but more than red. But I do remember being at a party at someone's house during the Holy War. Because I was out on the East Coast, it was a lot harder to get these games. They weren't always like nationally broadcast like now. And so we were all there, however we were getting it, and everyone was there. It was pretty much all BYU guys, and BYU was winning a lot. Again, this was the 90s at some point. I don't remember the year. And that was the one time I felt, and I was a kid, so the hate hadn't built in me so much, but I saw my dad losing all, taking all the jabs and everything from all these guys. I was kind of rooting for Utah. That was the one time I was like, and then Utah still lost. I was like, well, sucks for them. But I moved on. But yeah, it's wild. So again, I'm on the East Coast, and there's a lot of members, but not nearly as many Utah fans out this way as there are BYU fans. So we don't run into a lot. But so I'm kind of curious to hear how it is for you guys being in state with the rivalry and where you think it's at now. But also, just gonna say well, actually, I'll get back to that. Let's talk about in-state and what it's like there in person. Work, neighbors, church, wherever. Just walking down the street, anywhere you go, there's people on either side of this rivalry. And so, how do you feel like the state of that is there in person?
I will say it is a much less toxic environment than it was several years ago. I just remember it's difficult living in a state where when the two paths diverged, right? When Utah went to the Pac-12, BYU felt like they were on their own island and independence. And it was rough because I remember seeing Pac-12 stickers everywhere. Like, it wasn't just enough to say, hey, we're in the Pac-12, you're not, get away from us, little brother. And it felt like they just didn't want anything to do with BYU. And so that was like the banter back and forth of like, you guys aren't even on our level. Like, and it felt like that for a while. And then Bronco he was just always consistent. And it was nice. Even the years that we lost to Utah, we still had successful winning seasons. But yeah, I just remember those weeks leading up to the game on Saturday, and there's no middle ground. You're either on the Utah side or the BYU side. Even people that are like Utah State fans, like, they tend to lean one way or the other. There's no impartial fans. I mean, that's just how I felt. I don't know about you, Trevor.
Yeah, I think it's up to you whether you get down into what I like to call the 15 to 20%. I feel like with any fan base, there's 15 to 20% of fans that will ruin it for everyone else, right? Those people that you run into that give BYU fans or give Utah fans a bad name, right? They're vulgar, they're in your face, they just ruin that experience for other people.
Do you want to describe BYU's 10 to 15% now, or?
Listen, as a kid, I grew up in a household full of the 15 to 20%.
Yeah.
That's not so much. That's not so much now these days, and I think that's a big part of us being able to sit down and have genuine conversations. Look, when we were on that winning streak that we talked about with our kids, there were 4 or 5 years where that guy would show up to my house at 2:00 in the morning and spray paint a big Y, go Cougars, on my front lawn. And that will infuriate you. But to be fair, every year he did that, BYU lost. So
it's your
if
fault.
he wants to come back up this week and do that again, I'm all for it. But
that's a hard pass. Those days are long gone. But yeah,
I just think with any fan base, and you see it a lot more being in state. But I think I've always kind of obviously been a big Utah fan, and so you try to represent, your team as best you can. But I mean, there's always opportunities for you to dip in and get into it with other fans. But yeah, it's I am on the side that is glad BYU and Utah are in the same conference, because I do think that this is one of the best rivalries in college football. And so I'm happy to see that this, I was rooting for BYU to play to come back against Arizona, because I wanted them to be 15 seed. I wanted them to be as ranked as high as possible going into this game against Utah, because I wanted it to be everything on the line, and it is. And I'm glad that the Fox Noon Big Noon kickoff is going to be there. It's going to be.
So let me ask you this: along those lines, right? Where do you fall, Trevor, on having the rivalry game at the end of the year like they have in the past, or kind of in the middle of the season? Because it feels like middle of the season, there's not a whole lot of like those high profile games. And so it feels like with the Big Noon kickoff, there's going to be more eyes, especially the time we'll get those East Coast eyes, where in the past it might have been a little bit of a later game. Do you prefer it where it's at, or would you still like it to go back to that last game of the year where everything's on the line?
So we talked a little bit about this on our podcast, and I almost prefer it to be earlier in. I think middle of the season is perfect for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's really one of BYU's first big tests as far as programs that they're going up against. But the other thing too is when it's at the end of the season, especially when they're in the same conference, there's always the game that fans play of, oh, well, you played West Virginia and we played West Virginia, but you were on the road and we were at home, and this is how we did versus how you did. We're a better team than you are. And I always hate that, because you throw everything out the window when it comes to rivalry games, and you just never know. And so I think having the game at the end of the season stirs the pot a lot more when you're in the same conference. I would much rather it be in the middle of the season and get it over with, and then you can focus on bowl games and everything else, at the end of the season.
How about you, Trevor? Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, I think big rivalries like this belong at the end of the season. You're right in some ways, like right now. So I guess where it's good is like right now, both have everything to play for in front of them. Whereas you get to the end of the season and maybe one of the teams like tapers off near the end, right? And so then by the time you get to that last game, maybe the stakes aren't as high. Granted, the stakes are always high in this game, but you know what I mean? You're not, maybe one team isn't playing for much, whereas the other team has a lot to play for or something.
Yeah, I like that at the end of the season, because that's still right. Like there's been years where our season's gone, like it's over. But man, if we could play disruptor and upset to Utah, like that is the one thing I like about having it at the end of the season, is like we're gonna ruin their season, like we're gonna ruin their chance.
No, that's a great point. There's still something to play for. You still have something to look ahead to. So you're right. And I think, but also, and this happens more and more when BYU and Utah are in the same conference, at least like from like the Mountain West days on, like they were both at the top of the conference. So many times the winner of that game won the conference, went to the biggest bowl game, like continued on, right? Like they had everything to play for, and it all came down to that game. And in those moments when they were the top two of the conference and playing each other with everything on the line, those were big stakes, and having that in the last game of the season is just a lot of fun. It's maybe almost too much. Like it's a lot to handle, to try to process at once. But that's what it's all about. And I think, so I don't know. I don't know why they keep putting it in the middle of the season. I do love same thing. I was rooting for Utah against Arizona State last week. One, because it helps BYU more in the long run in the Big 12 standings. But two, you wanted this to be a big time game, and we got what we wanted. We got big noon Fox coming, and it's gonna get, I think, the flowers that this rivalry game deserves. It's going to get the spotlight it deserves. And so I'm really excited for that because, like you said, BYU and Utah are finally back in the same conference, which all this realignment, I think, has ruined a lot of college football. But there's a few cases where you actually see teams reunited because things have been mixed around so much. And this is one of those. And so I think that's a really big plus, and I think it's the premier rivalry of the Big 12, and like you said, Trevor, one of the best in all of college football.
And credit to Bronco, honestly, for keeping BYU. Like, I was really worried seeing them go the independent route. If they fall off the map a little bit and they get back into the Big 12, but they get back in as one of the the lower rung teams that doesn't really have a good, strong season, year in and year out, it would be different. But to come in and to have the success that they did early on, and same with Utah, it's been nice. It's been nice going into a big conference and having the two teams that have been, battling throughout the years still continue that trend of being year in and year out one of the top teams in the league. That is a nice feeling for sure.
Yeah. And Trevor, you're talking about this, or maybe you, Tyson, but in terms of how this rivalry game is always close. Like obviously there's going to be some drop off when you're in independence and the other team is in a power conference, like recruiting shifts and everything. And that's just going to perpetuate itself. But most of those games during that time were really close. Like, was it 2018? Zach Wilson starting as a true freshman. BYU was up for 3 quarters. Like, BYU had no business being up in that game for where they were in that season. I think, where do we go? The Potato Bowl in Boise that year. And
you even look at last year, right? Utah going into that game had no business hanging around, and for it to be as close as it is, I just anytime I look at the betting line, if it's more than a touchdown spread, I'm taking whoever's getting the points, period, because it's always going to be close.
So the money line is plus what, 3? Plus 3.5 right now. Do you think that for Utah, which,
and there's a lot of BYU
I think you'll be able to use that as fuel for sure.
A lot of BYU fans upset about that line.
See, I'm not. I like poster board material. Like anything that Kalani can use to their advantage. Like I've always said, I would love to play for a coach like Kalani. Like, I would run through a wall, and I'm sure a lot of the players feel the same way. Like, I think that's why he's had some of the success that he's had, and to put the head coach, or not the head coaches, but to have 2 former head coaches as your offensive and defensive coordinators, and some of the other coaches, like, you don't see that a lot. And I think Kalani's ego is such that he doesn't care. Like, he just genuinely loves the program. He loves the people that he works with. And I think that that's a very rare thing to see. And I think a lot of the coaching aspect and the things that he's learned came directly from Kyle. He said as much throughout the years. And it's just nice that, Kyle came from a great program and was able to help another program turn into a winning program. So just had to throw that out there. Sorry.
Well, Utah had trouble scoring at home last season, so they went out and hired an offensive coordinator that knew how to score in that stadium, and has really helped turn things around. John Beck knew how to get touchdowns at Rice.
Yeah.
So he's continuing that legacy. I'm just
right. So, all right. So then this brings something up. So, because we talk about the spread being different, and before you jumped on, Tyson, Trevor and I were talking about kind of program recognition from an AP standpoint. Neither one of us are big fans of the AP poll, because I think that there's skewed memories of what a program is, not what the team is this year. And so,
well, that's a perfect example. Look at Clemson. That's the perfect example. Like, some of these programs get the benefit of the doubt before the season even starts. But yeah, it's ridiculous. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. But so along those same lines, and this is where I've always struggled from a BYU Utah perspective, especially when Utah got the invitation to the Pac-12. I always felt like BYU, their fans were like, that should have been us, over, not necessarily over Utah, but as a package deal. And I look at the things that, because we had Wyoming's podcast guy on the deal, and he's bitter. You know, he always felt like Wyoming was always in there with Utah, and then to see Utah go on and be the program that they are now, he says a little bit of it's jealousy, but you know, he hates to see a team that was almost considered an equal to now going on to bigger and better things. And I've always, and this is kind of, I do not mean this in a negative light. I really don't. But I've always felt that when Utah busted the BCS twice and did those things and then got invited to the Pac-12, for me, it was always like, well, BYU fans, and again, this is probably the 15 to 20%, were like, well, then we should be invited too because we're their rival and we should be able to do those things. And they hadn't they hadn't gone on and done a perfect season and done those types of things. And so I think that's where a lot of that friction comes, is from a Utah's perspective. It's, well, hold on a second. Like, you haven't done those things. And yes, you've beaten us on some rivalry games and things like that. But some of the hate and things that we get spewed from BYU fans is, well, we're just as good as you and we deserve these things and we should be at that same level. And I think that's where a lot of that friction comes from. And I don't know if that makes sense to either one.
It does. I'm in a place now where I can honestly like speak to how I felt. Like I did. I felt like this was going to be the great divide. This was going to be, Utah's going to take it to the next step. BYU is just going to take a step back. And from a fan's perspective, my knee-jerk reaction when they went independent was, what are we doing? Utah is going to this big power conference, and we're kind of just, we're not going to stay where we're at because we feel like that's not the path that's going to get us to a big conference. Let's just go in the independent route. And I was skeptical throughout as an independent. I do think that realistically, from a realistic standpoint, I don't think BYU was ever going to make it into the Pac-12, just from the religious aspect of not being able to play and then take away football and basketball, right? All of the other sports, the majority of them do their meets or whatever on the weekends, Saturday, Sunday. It was never going to work out for BYU. I think that's why the West Coast Conference was such a great partner throughout our time as an independent, because, that conference aligned with our values of not playing on Sunday. And it was a great stepping stone while we processed independence and eventually made our way to the Big 12. Honestly, I was skeptical that we would make it to a big conference after that. And so finally to see, and again, on the other side, right, when we made it to the Big 12, and then to see, it's probably the way you guys felt when you made it to the Pac-12 and BYU went the independent route. Some of the happiest times of a BYU fan that I've ever had is when BYU got invited to the Big 12 and then see the dismantling of the Pac-12. Some of the happiest days in my life. And it was only that way because of the way that we were treated as the redheaded stepchild of Utah fans. Well, you don't belong. We're in the big conference. And all of those conversations around, well, we're better than you. You don't belong with us. To see that, to the divide there, and then to go full circle to both of us being in the Big 12, it felt good. It felt good to be there first, and then to see Utah ultimately make their way here. I am worried that it's not a definitive long-term thing that BYU and Utah are both going to be in the Big 12. I think Utah has aspirations to make it to the Big 10. And I think if that happens, it will be, again, another chapter in the, well, who's better than who? But from where we're at now, it feels good. It feels good to be back in the same conference again and kind of to be on equal footing, especially being in the same state where recruiting is such a big thing between the two schools.
Yeah, I think my issue with when the Pac-12 invite came is, one, Utah didn't get the invite because the Pac-12 won in Utah. Utah got the invite because they accidentally invited Colorado and didn't get anybody else from the Big 12. They were trying to pillage the whole Big 12, got stuck with Colorado, who, I think on paper, in terms of programs and where they were at, and you look at most of the criteria that you'd look at, I think BYU would have been better on paper than Colorado, but Colorado is who they had. They could only take one, and they picked Utah. And at the time, and I think even Trevor Maddich, I can't remember, I think it was him on ESPN, was kind of going off on it, and I haven't been able to go find the old clip, but he made the point on all these things in terms of facilities, this and that, wherever, and the two programs, like Utah did make it to the BCS Bowl, but between those times, BYU was winning more than they were losing to Utah during that stretch. Of course, if we're zoomed in enough, and obviously the first time they went and beat Pitt, I was on my mission, so that one doesn't even count. But because I don't remember it, but it felt like it was because of, like you touched upon, Tyson, it felt like it was because of some bigotry against the church and therefore the school. And so it's like, it wasn't even like on even footing. And so for Utah to say, oh, look, we're better at recruiting. It's like, well, yeah, you're better than recruiting because they didn't want us in this conference because of religious reasons. And now, like, we were neck and neck always. And it became this self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, well, yeah, you get in, you're going to continue to get these benefits. But BYU continued to play Utah close. And there were some advantages that Utah had that BYU didn't. And BYU had some kind of built-in inherent advantages that Utah doesn't, and was able to weather the storm through independence. And it wasn't always easy, but I think it was the right thing to do. And long story short, we're both here now, and I'm happy about that. So let's shift a little.
I've got one question for you, because we covered this a little bit, and I'd be interested to know your guys' opinion on this.
Yep.
So Red River rivalry, right? Played at a neutral site every year. If for some reason, obviously, I'm a big believer that Utah is going to get an MLB team by 2029. I think it's going to be Utah. I think it's going to be Nashville. Let's say in 5 to 6 years, Utah gets an NFL team. What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Having it at an NFL stadium, neutral site, splitting it half and half fans versus every other year at different stadiums?
Man, I don't know, because I genuinely enjoy. Again, the last two games I've been to both. I went to the BYU game 2 years ago, and I went to the Utah BYU game at Utah last year. There's something to be said about home field advantage. Like the rock is one thing, the muss is something else, and I love that there's an advantage and a disadvantage both ways. It would be interesting to see, and we saw that a couple years ago at Vegas, at the Vegas Bowl, where it was a neutral site. Both teams played, and it was close. I think was it Jake Heaps that was playing? It was close. Came down to the very end. And you and I were, I don't know if you went, Trevor, but Matt and Mike, a bunch of our friends that are BYU and Utah fans were down there for that. That was fun. That was a good experience. But there's just something else about knowing they're coming to BYU. And I've been to home games down there this year, and I've never seen a production put on like what they're doing down at LaVell Edwards Stadium now. And this leads into another question I want to ask you guys about later, is the NIL money and the amount of money that's being poured into the athletics down at BYU. I like it at having it back and forth at the different stadiums, but I don't know. I would lean with that direction probably.
See, and I think that's what college sports is all about, is playing in those environments, and in that, like, it's what makes college special. It's not the NFL. And for me, that's a good thing. That's part of the draw of it, and being in those environments on campus and having that. I mean, you even look at these schools like Miami that are playing in an NFL stadium or playing in another stadium off campus, and where their environments maybe aren't the same. There's just something special and unique about that. I mean, I see what you're describing, and there's a certain appeal to it, but I think with college sports, I just love the purity of that. And in terms of NIL, I'll just say quickly, BYU got invited to the Big 12 at exactly the right time, right? Like,
for sure,
because we're positioned, like, there are some inherent advantages, but also disadvantages of being the affiliated or owned and run by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that's just a fact. But then NIL has that, as you've talked about before, Trevor, how it's kind of flattened things out and allowed other programs to take advantage of it. And BYU is well positioned to take advantage of it, which is great because it's helped BYU get a strong start in making that difficult jump from non-P4 up to the P4 level. So, yeah, I mean, it's worked out great for BYU. What? So, Trevor, you'd like to see a neutral site game?
I just think it would be interesting because I think, look, I'm one who has benefited from being able to sell Utah tickets. We've got like 28 season tickets for the University of Utah, and we sell them out. Sometimes if we know BYU is going to be at Rice Eccles, we'll hold on to 4 or 5 seats, just so we can sell those tickets. I just think it would be such a cool environment to just split it down, half red, half blue, and get both fan bases in the same arena.
Well, hear me out. How about instead of in Salt Lake, why don't they do it in Arlington?
Well, because
I don't like that because
you can't travel.
Well, no, I'm saying in the Big 12 championship.
Oh,
so
yeah.
The regular rematch, Arlington, then I'm all about it. But regular season,
yeah,
I
like that.
Oh, see, we could have that. Play each other twice in one season. Could the Holy War handle it?
Well, then BYU better beat Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Because
I will say, I think watching this game last week with Arizona, their head coach is getting that program on the right track. It's his second year as a head coach. They were garbage last year. But towards the end, they started getting it together. I've watched that game 3 times. I've gone back and watched it.
Oh, you're a sadist. Oh, man.
They're a well-run program. I think Arizona is going to do well the remainder of their schedule. I think they've got some great pieces if they can stay healthy. Going back and watching the ASU Utah game, I mean, Utah took them out behind the woodshed and they let them know, who Utah football is. And I couldn't have been happier. I absolutely do not like their head coach. Especially after last year, how that game ended with BYU. But again, going back to what Trevor said, like it's hard to compare apples to apples and say, well, you beat this team by this amount. This is where we should be, and especially comparing that going into a rivalry game, because anything can happen. I mean, we've seen it. Anything can happen in those games.
Yeah, my big point on that too, I forgot to say, was in terms of where the game is in the season. If it's going to be mid-season, you at least got to give both teams a bye week after the rivalry game, because
it's emotional.
Come out physically beat up, but yeah, emotionally, win or lose, like you come out on this like high, or can you focus and you lose? Obviously, that really sucks. And so regardless, like you look at both teams coming out flat last year, although Utah, whatever, but maybe that was par for the course. But both teams did not come out looking as strong as they could have the following week.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Trevor, on a 1 to 10 nervous scale, watching Bear Bachmeier, right, as a true freshman, in watching that Arizona game, one of the things I watched the third time I went through was just to watch his demeanor. And there was a moment in that game that I thought, this kid is special. He threw that route to Chase Roberts for a first down on third down, and Chase had it on the hands and he dropped it.
And
any other quarterback would have, and rightfully so, thrown his arms up and be like, what are you doing? Come on, I did my job. And he looked to the sidelines and he had this look of bewilderment, like, how did he miss that? Yeah. And it wasn't, I get chills thinking about it. Like, I don't think people realize, I think Bear and Tiger are cut from a different cloth. They're like computers. And Kalani's explained it like he's like a computer. He has a mistake and then he learns from it. I can't imagine how nice that is to have somebody that is that big a piece of your offense throws the perfect pass, you drop it, and he's not in your face about it. I'm sure there was a conversation, and I'm sure Chase felt bad, dropping the pass and getting back to the huddle. But I was pleasantly surprised to see Bear Bachmeier's demeanor throughout that game. He was never too high. He was never too low. And he made some really big plays. And you look at their quarterback as well, Trevor, your quarterback, he's been through some highs and lows, but he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that gets rattled very easily. I'm excited to see how these two quarterbacks perform in this game head to head.
It'll be interesting because as I've sat and thought about this, personally, I think whoever wins the coin toss is going to want to receive the ball first. Because if Utah can get the ball first and score and get a lead, their offensive line and their running game, if they've got the lead, they can dictate the pace of the game from there. And that would be a big advantage for Utah. I do think that they've got the ability to pass the ball as well. And I think that BYU will have their hands full with Dampier as a scrambling quarterback. I mean, he's got the wheels to be able to get out and go places. I'm not an X's and O's kind of guy. Like I'm not the guy that's going to sit and tell you who the third string linebacker is and this and that. From what I've seen this year, I think Utah, their offensive line is one of the best that they've had in recent years. And so if they can get the ball early, dictate tempo and pace, I think they've got a really, really good shot of controlling the game. I have not watched as many BYU games, but I do have a lot of respect for Bear. It's just, man.
I will say, every night I'm praying that Jack Kelly is playing this Saturday, because you watch him and how he shadowed the quarterbacks that are dual threats, like your quarterback. And some of the close speed that he has on these quarterbacks is remarkable. That closeout that they had to force the turnover to Isaiah Glasgow was unbelievable. They showed the replay, and his close speed as the quarterback was going on a straight line, Jack Kelly's ability to get to him before he could turn up. So on your side of the ball, Trevor, are you more confident in your offense's ability or your defense ability? Because for me, as much as I like Bear Bachmeier, if we have a healthy Isaiah Glasgow and Jack Kelly, I would have a difficult time believing that our defense is going to be the one that lets down and loses the game for us. I like Jack Kelly in shadowing your quarterback.
So that's always been interesting because historically, I've always been more confident in Utah's defense. They've always been known at putting defensive guys into the NFL. I mean, we had Josh Nurse on the podcast earlier this season. He's a guy who'd never played a defensive snap in Pop Warner at all. Utah got him to switch, and he did great things on the defensive side of the ball. This year is one of the first years where I've looked at Devin Dampier, and I think it's helped with him and Beck having experience at New Mexico and being able to bring that comfortability to Utah. I'm always confident in Utah's ability to play defense. And that hasn't changed. I think what's changed for me this year is now I have more confidence in our ability offensively to go out and do something. And so, but Trevor and I got on one of the first weeks of the season, and it's the Cowboy fan in me to not get too up because I don't want to get let down. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'll put it that way, because Devin Dampier, he was not 100% against Texas Tech. And I think the struggle there was Utah's defense held Texas Tech at bay. Offense would turn the ball over, the defense would go get it back. And then fourth quarter came and they just couldn't do it anymore. And so if Utah's offense can hold their water and do what they're supposed to do, then they don't have to put that much pressure on the defense. And so whatever the over-under is, I'm taking the under, because I think both defenses will be able to do a good job. Like I said, I think it's going to come down to the run game and who can dictate tempo.
Yeah, I think to your point, Utah's offense, so when they're clicking, they really seem to be clicking. But when they've struggled, like against Wyoming, at least for a half, and against Texas Tech, the team kind of falls apart. Like the defense is doing their part, and the offense just can't keep up. And it's amazing that the defense is able to continue to keep the team in the game when the offense is really not moving that much. So I do worry, like that puts a lot of pressure on BYU's defense. We've had some health issues, so we're getting guys like Jack Kelly back. We're getting Jonathan Cabella back, allowing people to slide into their natural positions and giving us some more depth. I do like this team, especially with Jay Hill having time to prep for and coordinate, a defensive plan for this team. I feel confident about that. However, if this game becomes a shootout, I do worry about BYU, because we're not really meant to put up tons and tons and tons of points. And where BYU is most comfortable is getting an early lead, even if it's not huge, and just grinding out the clock and wearing down the other team. And so, yeah, to your point, if Utah gets an early lead, that puts a lot of pressure on BYU. But Tyson, you were talking about Bear, and he is special. I've just watched him all season, and he really has just shown so much poise that you see him, like, even when he has turned it over, he comes right back and makes an amazing pass. Or last week with that drop pass with Chase Roberts, he goes on. Now it's fourth down, makes an even more difficult pass.
Yeah, he dropped that right in where it needed to be.
And he just continues to show he has. And it's great that he went up against a defense like Arizona last week that showed a lot of different things and disguised a lot of pressures and things, because now he's seen it. And granted, he gets to go up against BYU's defense all the time, but now, going up against Utah I think it's safe to say, is going up against the toughest defense that he will have seen. And so he's had some preparation for that. And so I think I won't be surprised if BYU turns it over some, but BYU's also got to do the same thing and turn it over. And yeah, if Jack Kelly can slow down Dampier, then I think, I really think that's the best game plan, but it only works if you got, everybody healthy. I don't know.
Are you guys missing someone in the first half?
No, he got that at the first or second quarter of the first half of last game. So he'll be there for the full game against Utah. You're talking about
because of the rain delay. Yeah, the rain delay, it made it feel like it was the second half, but it was the first half.
Yeah, and I'm going back to the toughest defense that BYU will face. I honestly I feel like this is one of those years that lines up so favorably towards BYU, because it feels like it's been a gradual increase in difficulty, where Utah, they've had some easier games leading up, and then they had Texas Tech right out of the gate. That was difficult. I think it's been nice to see BYU take gradual steps in the teams that they play. it would.
Especially with a freshman quarterback. That's what you need to have.
We probably would have had a loss had we faced someone like Texas Tech earlier on in the season. I feel like it's been nice to see Bear and the younger players get their feet wet and gradually see that increase in the other team's abilities. Eventually, I want to ask a question. I feel like I'm hijacking the call, but
no, go ahead.
And I mean this in the nicest way possible. Is there a sentiment that makes you nervous as a Utah fan, seeing Fox Big Noon out here for this game? You go back to the game against Texas Tech. Go back years ago when they played TCU and they came out and they had this big production college game day. Like, it just seems like that, and that's where I worry about BYU. Is it feels like there's so much going on that it's almost a disadvantage to have somebody like the Big Noon Kickoff or the college game day out there beforehand. It just is. And I can't remember BYU's track record when they've had production companies like that come in, but it just watching Utah struggle against TCU or Texas Tech. Are there nerves on your end knowing that they're going to have this right before the big rivalry game, or does it not play as much of a part because it's at BYU?
Look, for me, it doesn't matter, right? I'm a fan. It doesn't bother me one bit. I can be nervous. I can not be nervous. I'm going to have absolutely no influence on the outcome. I think Utah losing to Texas Tech had more to do with their limitation in play calling because Dampier was hurt and he couldn't do as much as he probably could have. But I think, if anything, Witt is one of the longest tenured coaches in college football. And if that is an issue, if they've identified that as an issue, he'll rectify that situation going into this week. But I think Kyle does such a good job of getting his guys up and letting them understand the importance of this rivalry. Like, that's one of the things that when we've talked to former players on our podcast, is when they come from out of state, they don't know about the rivalry until rivalry week, but then they know the importance of it. And so I have no doubt that Utah will be prepared and that they'll be focused on the task at hand on Saturday.
So, other Trevor, did you hear Kyle Whittingham's comment this week when they opened up and asked him about Bear and BYU's offense? Did you hear those comments at all?
For the record, he's the other Trevor.
Yeah. BYU, I'll say BYU Trevor.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. So for the record, too, Trevor married my cousin, and she was like my best pal when we were kids. And so,
oh, no kidding.
He's the second.
He's the other one. He was the addition after the fact.
But our relationship was very different than yours, so I want to also make that clear. So. Yeah, I heard it. I don't know. I'm of two minds on it. Like, part of me just doesn't care. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, and then people showed, like, look, here's him commenting on other quarterbacks and other press conferences, and look at how Kalani responded. And Kalani is Kalani. Like, he's a classy guy, and he's always going to take the high road. I don't think Witt not wanting to comment on it is that big a deal. I don't know. I think what annoys me more is that it's like, if there were no context of a history of who Witt was, then it would probably be like whatever. But it's like him always like doing little things like that, like just to be petty, is where it's like, oh my gosh. But I don't know. I didn't get that hot and bothered by it. I do think it's a little bit of him being petty, but I also don't think it's a big deal. I don't know. Where are you at with it?
It's interesting because I listened to that on the heels of listening to Kalani's press conference on day one.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you said, Kalani is Kalani. And he was the same way, whether he was at Utah or at BYU. But just always the same, even keel, unless he's on the sideline dancing. But it was just different because you listen to his presser and kind of how he answer the questions that came, and then going straight from that, listening to Kyle, it just felt like I think this is a big game for Kyle. I think this is, look, he's getting towards the end of his career, and I don't think he wants to go out on a losing skid against his biggest rivalry. I think if they end up losing to BYU this year, I think he comes back again for another year. I think this game means more to him than he will admit.
What if they lost to BYU, went on to win the Big 12, made it to the playoff? Let's say they even win a game in the playoff or whatever, have a good showing, whatever. They do whatever. Do you think that would still be enough for him to be like, egg him on? And I'm like, I got to come back one more year and beat Utah or beat BYU.
Trev, you take that one. I don't know. I don't know Kyle as much as I would know like Kalani and some of the former BYU coaches.
Hang on just one second.
Don't bother him right now. He's busy.
So no, I don't think that his decision of retiring or not has anything to do with the game. Look, he's 11-5 against BYU in his career as the head coach at Utah. Like, I don't think 11-6 is going to be like, oh man, I got to get 12. Like, I think he's done plenty to show his ability as a coach to get the better. And you mentioned earlier about Bronco Mendenhall, and I always scratch my head with BYU fans because I always looked at Bronco Mendenhall as an incredible coach. I mean,
he was phenomenal. I was mad when they let him go, they let him walk.
And I feel like the BYU fans that were mad were the minority, especially in Utah. And I don't know how you felt about this, Trevor, being out of state, but in state, it felt like, get him out of here. We want someone else. We need someone else. And I just remember sitting back thinking, why would you want someone else right now? Like, that guy is gone. He's getting 10 wins a season, and they want him out on his butt, which is always baffling to me.
It's weird. I'm a big Bronco guy. It did kind of feel like I saw Bronco's perspective, and I saw some of the fans. I liked Bronco. I understand why he was kind of ready to move on. He's a kind of an acquired taste, I think, to some, but I like him. And he went to UVA, so it was great because I got to go. There was some of his coaching staff was in my dad's ward, and so we'd get tickets to go to like usually an earlier, lesser game or whatever in the season. So I go watch UVA games and see Bronco and stuff and root for him. So, that was fun. But yeah, I don't know. I'm with you. It was weird, and I didn't think that there were better options out there. Now, I don't know if Kalani was better day one, but I think Kalani had the potential to get BYU to where it is now, and maybe Bronco had kind of hit his ceiling. And also, if you look at this day and age of NIL, I don't know if Bronco would have done as well with all the boosters and things. And maybe it wouldn't have mattered, but we see that it mattered in terms of like Mark Pope left, and all of a sudden these pocketbooks opened up for Kevin Young. And so I wonder if, maybe it would have been a situation kind of like that if we still had Bronco today, and we wouldn't see BYU as prominent in the NIL game as they are right now for in general. So, in the long run, I think it worked out for the best, but yeah, in the short term, it was kind of a head scratcher.
Does the NIL make you nervous at all, Trevor? The difference between BYU and Utah? Look at the number one recruits that BYU basketball is landing. Like, I'm not saying that it's going to translate to BYU being, perennial championships in basketball and football, but there is something that that people are taking note of. Like, it's a different atmosphere. It feels like nothing else I've ever felt around the program than what has been taking place the last year or 2 years at BYU.
So yeah, I don't know. Why would I be? Oh, you're asking him if he's nervous.
Yeah,
oh,
sorry, I should have said.
Why would I be nervous? Yeah, that's.
Yeah. Listen, this is how I'll answer that question. I think, depending on how this game goes this week, will go a long way to answering that question, because I think it's one thing for kids to go and take money to play at a program, especially top tier athletes. You know, we talked about this earlier in the season about Texas Tech, right? They go from who to, and now they've got this influx of oil money and they can go out and buy a top tier team that can compete. I do still think that Utah's not the program that brings in 5-star recruits. They're the program that brings in the 2 and 3, maybe 4-star athletes and gets more out of them than most programs. And so I still think the culture, the family atmosphere that Whittingham and the coaching staff, I think that there's more to it than just money. Do I wish Utah had the NIL money that BYU had? 1,000%. I think it's a big part of the equation, but I think there's more factors to it. And I think if Utah on Saturday can go down, play tough defensively, and handle the game, I could care less about the money. And I think athletes could care less about the money, because they're going to want to go to a program that wins rivalry games and that does what they're supposed to in big games and big atmospheres like that.
So they asked Kyle about that, and he said, like, because they were referencing Texas Tech and the amount of money that they're putting into that program, and he said, like, good for them. Like, it shows that their program is committed to winning. And I think Kyle wishes that he might. I think he wishes he had some of the coffers that some of these other programs have. And I think Kyle is the type of person that he will make the most of whatever he has. And so if that budget or if that ability to spend added a 0 or 2, I think he would take it the furthest that anybody could. I think he gets the most out of what he has available. But I do worry about some of the disparity, the difference between some of these schools and the conferences. NIL opening up was the best thing for BYU. And having it be on that, we're still in that phase of not knowing how everything's going to turn out. It could be different a year from now, 2 years from now, once they get legislation in place. But it just feels weird. It feels nice being on this side of it, because for the longest time, it felt like BYU was on the bottom rung of what we had in our budget. It just feels nice being on this side of it. But
yeah,
go ahead.
Finish your thought. No, sorry.
No, I would be worried if it's not going to happen, right? I don't see this happening at all. But if Utah comes down and BYU beats them by 3 or 4 touchdowns, I think that I said it's not going to happen, right? However, if that were to happen, what would your opinion on NIL change at all?
100%, but that's not going to happen.
Well, I don't think so either. But
yeah, the thing is with NIL is you can go buy a team, but that doesn't necessarily promise you success. There's a lot of teams out there that have paid for.
Look at Oregon.
Yeah. I mean, and they have had a lot of success. They just haven't been able to get over the hump. But like you look at a Clemson. Well, no, actually, Dabo is notorious for not really embracing NIL. But you look at some of these other teams, you can't tell me Alabama's not investing, or
they've always been investing.
They've been investing 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. But they still are. But with that change in culture, like they're ranked in the top 10. Does anyone really think they're like the Alabama of old? Nobody's confusing them for a Nick Saban team. And, there's a lot of programs. Look at Penn State. I guarantee they put tons of money into that roster.
They're paying their coach $49 to walk. That's incredible.
It really is. And he's not even a bad coach. He's just shown he's kind of can't get over. He's kind of shown his ceiling, I think, at least at Penn State. But
they're one play away from making it to the championship game last year. I don't understand why they're so quick to get rid of some of these coaches.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
No, you're fine, and that's a whole nother tangent with Penn State, but what I think is more impressive with Texas Tech, not so much that they have the money, and that they've been able to do it in such quick order and build that team. Because you saw what, like, for example, BYU in 23, when we had a lot of new guys that we brought in through the transfer portal and we rebuilt, and it took time for that team to gel. And now NIL was a little bit of that, but a lot of that was just transfer portal, whatever, and getting a new team together. And Texas Tech has done it on the fly, it feels like, with NIL, and it's come together. And so they're doing something more than just paying players. And what really chaps my hide is that for these SEC or Big Ten schools that complain, it's like, yeah, look at Texas Tech only because they bought, and to your point, Trevor, it's like, one, all these guys are buying their teams too. It's not any different. But secondly, they've been doing it for years before it was even allowed. And so now that these other teams are finally allowed to start spending like them and are able to get away with it, it's evening the playing field a little bit, and they don't like that. And I think just the hypocrisy there is humorous, but also infuriating.
Yeah. It's funny to see. And that was one of the comments I made when NIL first started coming out. Is I remember I was having a discussion with somebody, and I said, like, I think you're going to see the gap between the top tier and the bottom tier start to diminish. I think, especially for the programs that start to embrace NIL, you're going to get those fringe players that make a difference on some of these programs. There's always going to be those 1% athletes that come in and can change a program, especially at the quarterback position. But you look at some of those fringe receivers, running backs, offensive, defensive linemen. If it's between going from one school to the other, but you're going to end your 4-year schooling with that program $2 million richer, that's going to play a big impact on where you ultimately decide to go. And so you have all these major teams pre-NIL that were stacking you look at the depth chart on some of those Alabama teams. They had 4 or 5-star recruits in the wings not even playing because they were waiting for their turn. Now those 4 and 5-star players can go just about anywhere and make significant money. I think it was a great equalizer that you're going to start to see some of these programs that haven't had a big name in the past start to make big waves because they are starting to sign some of these players, and the coaches are able to put that team together.
Yeah. So I had I meant to do this earlier, and when we were talking about the rivalry and what's going on there with it kind of in state, but for me, it's easier being removed to be like, okay, like I can kind of root for Utah when they're not playing, except for Twitter. If Twitter didn't exist, social media didn't exist, it makes it so
15 to 20%.
It makes it so hard to root for Utah or start building any leeway. So I grabbed some of my favorite, most benign kind of fun, good-humored trash talk on Twitter. So not none of the toxic stuff, but I wanted to start with this before we move over to Twitter. As first of all, so just so you know,
we've come a long way.
Yep. You start looking at it, and a lot more of those guys are more and more BYU, and fewer from Utah there. So anyway, let's see. There's a few here, like Utah fans enjoy the final season of Game of Thrones. Utah fans put away only one chair at a time after the linger longer. So that's true. Of course, clapback. BYU fans don't know the difference between your and your. And that's when I took things personal.
Yeah, those grammatical disses did a little bit harder.
Personally, so I don't play into the grammar stereotype here. But yeah, I didn't. That one was a low blow. I didn't like that. This one here, I got to zoom out for this one. I like this one. This one's from earlier in the season. But you got damp, dampier, and dampest. So.
Oh,
So stupid. Let's see.
it is entertaining though. There's nothing better than jumping on Instagram or X after a game to see the comments. It makes for great entertainment.
Yeah, and
I'll give you my 2 cents as a Utah fan. Twitter's not the place to go. Like, one of my absolute happiest places in the world to go to when BYU is losing to Utah, especially in years where they're supposed to win, is cougarboard.com. The comments, and I think that is like a nesting ground for the 15 to 20%, because it's just overreaction city. And it's like, I just get a bucket of popcorn and just scroll through the comments. It's the best place in the world.
See, I don't even go to Cougar Board. I've never been there. I've like Googled things sometimes, and I'm like, what did I click on or whatever? I was like, oh, this took me to Cougar Board. Like, I've never like sought it out. I don't know who goes there.
I have.
And I don't know. And that's the thing. I think it's all Utah fans on there posing as BYU fans.
It's like five Cougar fans and 100 Utah fans.
Yeah, I really don't.
5 Cougar fans will keep those 100 fans entertained for years.
100%.
So I had this is, I mean, there's just stupid tweets like this. This is some of the stupid stuff, trying to get like personal and religious, but to the point, like, you know, this will be hilarious once he realizes who's Utah's founder is. Like, it's just, I don't know. This stuff is beyond me, but some of this other stuff is just stupid. Like, I like this one. I don't like to compare people, but if Dampier is so good, then why hasn't he won Big 12 Freshman of the Week? Boom. Just kidding. It's obviously meant as a stupid comment. Bear has won it like 3 times now. So, you know.
Is this Dampier's junior or senior year of eligibility?
I believe it's his junior. I think he played 2 years at New Mexico.
And then this one's my favorite, is this guy just cheering on the BYU, the Utah fan base. Have you seen this yet, Trevor?
No.
Oh, I'll let you watch it later. It's just, I don't know. He's there instructing everyone what to do at Splash Mountain at the game or whatever. I don't know. It's been kind of just a punching bag for Utah.
Yeah, look, listen,
there's stuff like that on both sides, but that's why it's fun.
Yeah, Utah has 15 to 20% as well. So it's both sides. Like, I was on Twitter or X earlier today, and I think we were talking about this before we went on the air. But a guy had posted a picture of Dampier 3 hours before the game started, so it looked like there was nobody there. And then the other picture was BYU rushing the field. And he goes, what's the difference between these two photos? And I did a backhanded comment, like, one's taken 3 hours before the game. The other one was after you beat a mediocre team. And he goes, we actually beat Utah. And I said, oh, so you get excited when you beat Big Brother. And like, there's just little things.
Those types of comments used to trigger me, and they don't anymore. And I kind of miss that back and forth. My mental health doesn't, but I went from more of like and I think Trevor has as well, right? The antics that you and I used to get into it's morphed into more of like a realistic standpoint from a fan that I understand where BYU is. I know what their strengths and their weaknesses are. I don't think I'll ever go into a rivalry game as confident as I used to go into those games, because I was just a BYU fan. I didn't really do my homework. I didn't know a whole lot about the other team. I didn't know a whole lot about our team. I just loved BYU. And to have intelligent conversations. We have a mutual friend that used to bash me for being a BYU fan. And we have great conversations now about their strengths and their weaknesses, and BYU strengths and weaknesses, and realistically where we think that each team's going to end up at the end of the year, and especially during the rivalry game. But like you said, you still run into those some of that 10 to 15% during the week. And it's like, they're the most uneducated fans, and they think that their team's always going to go undefeated and they'll never do any wrong. But
there's something about rivalry week that just turns the blinders on and throws all logic out the window. And to some degree, I like that as a fan, because I like, blind loyalty and just sticking with your team. But from the other side's perspective, it comes across as cockiness and maybe, a little brazen. But
yeah, I love that loyalty as well. So just saying, look at that blue tie.
Oh boy!
Oh, praise to the man.
Anyway, all right. Well, this has been fun. A fun reprieve from all this hate spewing out there from Twitter. It's been fun to talk about it, and it's always fun during rivalry week. I'm always such a nervous mess, and I mean, like last year, I felt so good when it was over, but like during it, I just hated everything about
rough,
the whole
man.
game.
That was a ton of emotional swings one way over and the other.
I couldn't handle it anymore. I was like, I just need this to end. Which is ridiculous. It's just a game, but at the end of the day, it's so much fun. This is what we live for. So, so excited for it. Just really hope, at the end of the day, Trevor's at home crying and I can be at home, crying tears of joy. No, but
let me ask you this. So Tyson and I have a standing bet. Anytime the Niners and the Cowboys play, anytime BYU and Utah plays.
$2 bill, 59.50 hat.
Would you like to be
7 3/8, Trevor? Don't forget.
7.5.
Oh, that you give them a hat for their.
Oh yeah, and you have to do the $2 bill because normally you don't have a $2 bill and you have to go to the bank. Anytime you ask for a $2 bill, they ask you, well, what's it for? And so that's part of the embarrassment of losing the bet is you have to get a $2 bill.
So loser buys the winner a hat of their choice and a $2 bill. So open if you'd like to be part of that bet this week. Just let me know.
I do have a $2 bill, one that we just recycle when we give to for Tooth Fairy stuff, and then the kids will give it to us when they buy something, and we just take it and we give it right back to them for the next two.
That's genius.
It just recycles. But anyway, I feel like if I started betting now, it would only jinx me. I'm not going to mess with it. This hat's done me all right, but
smart man.
Tyson, if you get tired of it, it sends you the wrong size or something, feel free to pass it along. But
you got it.
No, I'll sit this one out. But I would love to see pictures of the hat that you buy him, Trevor.
I'll send it to you on Monday.
Okay, yeah. Send me a picture.
2029.
We'll post it in the post game.
Predictions? Are we going to do predictions?
Yeah, let's do predictions. Let's go ahead.
Who wants to go first?
Hey, you brought it up. Let's hear it.
I think both offenses are going to struggle. I think both defenses are going to do really well. I am optimistic at seeing how BYU has made adjustments throughout the game. And it was interesting in that Arizona game, getting down in that second half, early third quarter, knowing that we've made adjustments and that we've gotten better as the game has progressed. I think it's semi-low scoring. I think it's going to be around 17-21 for BYU. Realistically, I can't say this, but I think it's going to be 70-0 for BYU. But I'm going to stick with 17-21.
I'll say it because Trevor's thinking it looks like I don't know. I can't get a read on it, and this game's going to be impossible, I think, for anyone to predict. But I do think it'll be weird. I'm going to predict lower scoring because if it starts becoming a shootout, I think that advantages Utah. I think if we keep it lower, but I do think both teams will score some. So I think it'll be high teens, low 20s, something, but it's going to be some weird score. Like weird things are going to happen. I'm predicting something like 25-23 BYU, something weird like that.
Yeah.
I've got 27-23 Utah.
So
I think Utah
kind of in that.
I think Utah holds them to 2 touchdowns and they kick a few field goals. I think Utah gets that extra touchdown But again, it's held to a couple of touchdowns. I think 27-23 Utah.
Okay.
And still cover.
Fair enough.
Well, Trevor, if you decide to go to the championship game, let me know. We can go together. Should be good this year. Hopefully it's, we're playing Texas Tech and not Arizona State. That was a
rematch with Texas Tech. Yeah, I'd love that. That sounds good. Yeah, because you'll need someone to go with, because Trevor,
Yeah, I don't think he wants to go watch BYU play. That's
he could come and then he can go to a Cowboys game.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
let's go, baby.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching this Holy War episode as we lead up to the game. I hope everyone is nice to all your Utah fans out there. If you're a Utah fan joining us, likewise, let's keep it civil. But thanks for watching. As always, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, go check out Trevor and the Tailgate podcast and he and his crew, and go watch them, support them. I'll have all their links and everything down in the description of the video down below. Like, subscribe, go check them out as well. And as always, go Cougs.